Hey team, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today I'm on with Miss Kacee Bohle from AgriMinds. Kacee, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Super excited to jump in. You have been out there hustling and grinding and doing all the things over the last couple of years in a good way. In a way, I think that's not necessarily the normal grind. And I want to dive into that today because that's part of the messaging. But you've done you've made your way into the coaching space, focusing on the ag sector. And I think that's going to be cool. So we're going to dive in. First question, though, everybody gets, what does it mean for you to be intentional?
You know that this is right up my alley. And I don't think I actually understood what that word meant until probably the last couple of years. But to be intentional means proactive as well, right? Like not just making choices on the spot, but anticipating when you're going to make those choices. And so being intentional to me means thinking way ahead, but also planning to plan. So that's been kind of my definition of being intentional.
Got it. It's challenging sometimes to be proactive, though.
It's so challenging.
We get so caught up in just the day-to-day, doing all the things, and we get so much on repeat sometimes that it's like we end up in reactive, non-intentionally.
Yeah, I had to take a lesson from my husband, who's Italian, and none of his family knows what a clock is. And so they are just kind of just going with the flow all the time. And so as someone who likes to be proactive, somebody who likes to plan and freaks out if I don't know what to expect, it is nice to know like there are moments where you can be proactive or reactive. And so I think that there's a time and a place. So if things are hard for you to be proactive, like don't beat yourself up because there is a place for being reactive as well.
What works for you?
I think what works for me is to be proactive. I like to plan, but
so you just like it. You're just one of those people who
do.
just enjoys thinking, like you've got that gift of foresight.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's my genius in the working genius, tool is wonder and discernment. It just comes naturally to me to think of possibilities. So yeah.
Yep. That's good. That's cool. Slightly jealous. I would love to have, I mean, I'm one of these guys who really has to work at blocking time to sit down and think about what I need to think about, and brain dump that list. And then in many cases, I mean, get some help. I mean, anywhere I can, I'm hiring, right? Anytime I can. If I can afford it, I'm hiring to get that done. I'm outsourcing that project. Because I just know, like, to an extent, someone else can do it better and they probably will enjoy it more. And if I can provide delight in their life by paying them to do a thing that I despise, I'm all in. I'm all for it. It doesn't really solve the intention problem because now that creates a whole nother layer of potential unintentionality, which is sometimes when you start outsourcing stuff, you just expect people to handle it and it can get done. And then you kind of lose respect for the process. Kind of like you and I were talking about this podcast, and we have a production crew that handles this thing on the back end. So we sit here, we have an hour conversation, but then we kick that over to the team and I don't see it until it comes live, so pretty wild. Well, tell us a little bit, Kacee, what are you up to? What is AgriMinds for those that aren't aware in my audience? Talk to us a little bit about what you're up to in this space.
Professionally, I'm a coach, speaker, and trainer, and I primarily do my coaching through a program called AgriMinds. It's a 12-week group coaching program for folks in the ag industry who just want to show up better, both at home and in the field. And from doing my coaching, a lot of different opportunities have presented themselves, such as going and speaking as a keynote speaker, doing workshops. And then I also do some one-on-one coaching as well. So that's really what my focus is. And then personally, I'm a wife, mom of two. We homeschool. I help my parents farm during planting and harvest season here in Indiana. And just try to keep my head above water some days at home. But I think that's where that intentionality ties in as well.
For sure. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. What so give us a little bit more understanding, if you will, of the the 90-day program and what you're doing there, or even in some of your one-off coaches or coaching programs, because I'm always curious, what are people struggling with? Like, what are some of the challenges that are coming up? If professionals are reaching out to you outside of maybe their traditional training that they're getting inside their companies, right? Obviously there's a need, for what
Yeah.
they're bringing up. So I'm curious, what are some of those challenges that are that you're addressing?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've kind of learned and heard from other mentors in this space have said, like, the person that you're best positioned to serve is your past self. And that's exactly
Mm-hmm.
where AgriMinds stemmed from. Is I was trying to find a community or a mentor or some kind of resource that would help me as I was navigating different seasons of change within my career, right? Like, I didn't really have anybody to go to when I was expecting my first child, right? Like, I needed a mentor
Mm-hmm.
that said, how can you climb the corporate ladder and have a kid? Or how can you not feel guilty about leaving the farm and going in and designing a career that works in alignment with your goals, right? And so, like, I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. And I just was
Mm-hmm.
really seeking this kind of community. But I found that when I went through these professional development courses through my place of employment, there were certain topics that were off limits, right? Like, there's just some things you can't talk about inside of your place of employment. And then vice versa, you go to like a personal coach or a friend or a mentor, and they didn't really
Yep.
understand the corporate side of things. And so I was like so desperate for this place where I could talk about all the things and not be limited to, oh, that's too personal or that's too professional.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be able to say, okay, where can we just sit at the crossroads of our personal growth and our professional development? And I couldn't find anything. And so
Mm.
I developed one. And I kind of
Yeah.
just took all of the favorite parts of these different leadership programs that I went through. I was in Maxwell Leadership and became a coach there, and different
Mm-hmm.
Purdue Extension had leadership through our county, and just all these different pieces that I just loved on top of the personal development books that I've read. And I'm like, how can I just take all the favorite parts and put them together, tailor it to the ag industry,
Yeah.
and put it in this nice little bundle that's tangible for people, so they get community, they get resources and tools that they can apply both at home and at the office, and be able to just say, you know what, no topic is off limits here. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
where AgriMinds came from. And I started this while I was on maternity leave and
Yeah.
with my second child. And so AgriMinds has been running for a little over a year now. We've helped probably close to 30 participants go from feeling stuck to like fully empowered. I'm really confident in my decisions now. I have an action plan. And
Mm-hmm.
one guy even said, "You saved my marriage." Now I understand my
Wow.
wife better, right? Like, it's just been
Yeah.
so cool to see like somebody who's invested in this program for one reason and come out on the other side of it going, I had no idea that this was actually the thing that I needed to focus on. And
Mm-hmm.
so I truly feel like it's my life's work. I've found the thing that I'm meant to do. And so that's what AgriMinds is to help other people find the thing that helps them get their spark back or feel like they're actually having their own back in the decisions that they're making. And so it's a really cool program. And like I said, it spans over 12 weeks. We cover 5
Mm-hmm.
core topics. We meet one time a week as a group. And then, they have unlimited coaching in between sessions. And it's just, it's such a life-giving part of my week. I just love it so much.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Do people have to leave their job to find their spark?
Not always. Not always. And I don't always recommend it. And here's why.
Mm-hmm.
I have so many people who come into the program thinking, I'm burnt out. I think I need a new job. I don't love what I do. And then they come in and they do some mindset work and they realize, oh, I was just approaching this through a different
Mm-hmm.
mindset that wasn't serving me well. And so when
Yeah.
we start making those shifts, they're like, oh, actually, I do love what I do. It's just here's this one piece that was hanging me up. And so sometimes it doesn't make sense to leave your job, one, financially, but
Mm-hmm.
two, you started this job for a reason. Let's figure out what that was. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
we get
Right.
back to the root of it. and we uncover where's the trouble actually at. And usually it's with our mindset. And so when we get back to the basics here, like I said, one girl said it gave her spark back. She realized she didn't need to actually leave her job. She just needed to go through a conversation with somebody that was kind of a roadblock for her. And once they got through that obstacle, it was smooth sailing from there.
That's wild. When you say mindset, can you go a little bit more granular on that? Because I know the word mindset gets thrown around a lot. We use it in our programs too. So, talk to me a little bit more about when we're getting that mindset shift or going to work on the mindset. What does that mean?
Yeah, and I get this kind of not pushback, but people don't always understand it, especially when I'm working with specific roles within the industry that don't have exposure to corporate training, right? For example, a lot of my farmers and ranchers that go through the program, this isn't something they've ever really been exposed to. So talking about feelings, talking about mindset, they roll their eyes. They're like, yeah, I'm not into that. So I have to be really careful about the verbiage that I use when I'm having conversations with them, just because it's a new concept. It's not something that they've considered before.
Right.
And so when I talk about mindset, I'm like, I even get down to the nitty gritty, like what's ticking you off? What's getting you excited? Like I just pick those keywords and I'm like, where are you frustrated? Where are things getting you, like, what's your heart throbbing about? Right. And then it's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, okay, your mindset is tied to those things too. Is it your growth mindset, right? When you're taking risks in expanding your business, for example, and you're like, this is a really scary investment. Here's all the things that I feel about it. Okay, well, that could be tied to a specific mindset that you have around money or what growth looks like, right? Or same thing, like, I can't seem to get ahead. I feel like everybody's beating up on me, all this bad luck. Okay, well, that might be a victim mindset. And so inside of AgriMinds, we go through 1 week where we literally just call out like the top 5 mindsets that people experience and give them a definition. And people are like, okay, which one might ring true for you? And then when we put it down in like really simple terms of like, what happens when I bring up money? And they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, well, that's a money mindset, right? And one of the things that I always like to suggest to people is if you haven't watched Inside Out, the kids movie, or Inside Out 2, which just recently came out, those are the best examples that I can show you of like a physical depiction of what a belief system or a mindset is and how it forms. So I know that those are kids movies, but sit down and watch them with your niece, nephew, grandkids, family, whatever, and watch those movies, because it does help you see where things are formed from. Maybe it's culture. Maybe that's what your parents believe, so that's how you think about things. Or maybe that's what society and social media has been shoving down your throat. So now all of a sudden you should be thinking or feeling or reacting a certain way. So when I'm talking about mindsets, I'm talking about, what do you think about stuff? How do you approach things? How do you not approach things? And that kind of shapes what we mean when we talk about mindsets.
You bet. I love the concept. Where I want to go with this is when I'm working with leaders and we're trying to upgrade their level of intentionality into their leadership, right? So I call it out on the show all the time. There are a lot of leaders leading teams in the space very unintentionally. Okay. They're so caught up in their day-to-day, in their own particular mindset issues, that they're not actually even in some cases capable of being truly intentional for their teams. What does that mean? Well, first of all, what it doesn't mean is just rolling over and giving everybody what they want all the time, or, just because they're complaining about it, you have to change the way you're thinking or the way you're moving. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about, right? What I'm talking about is like, do you have clarity on what type of culture or what type of team you're trying to create, and then working that problem backwards and then executing against the plan that produces. So many people's mindset, just we default back to so much of what we were brought up with. It may look differently now as an adult, but in my case, we grew up very poor, very broke in the 80s and early 90s. And, so I had a lot of work to do on my money mindset. especially early on in my career when I got into selling, and all of a sudden you're working with these very large numbers that seem, I mean, I might be doing single deals that are more money than I make all year, or more money than I might make in the next decade. Right. And I see this as one of the big challenges. I'll just give the example for people that are in sales. They get really bound up when it comes time to ask for the business. Right. Because they're weird about money. Why? Because we have scarcity mindset in the agriculture industry. We have this scarcity protectionist mindset. And it's warranted, right? Because it's, there's a lot of risk in the industry. That's inherent. And it's also interesting. There's just a lot of dollars that flow through this thing at the same time. Right. But we have this sort of scarcity mindset that in many ways actually starts to rob people of joy and fulfillment in the work that they do, because we have all this stress whenever money starts coming up in the conversation. So that's something I see that comes up a lot, that gets in the way of people being intentional, because it becomes about the almighty dollar. And so when it becomes about the dollar, what they start asking me is, how do I do this? Right. And in many cases, it's the wrong question, Kacee.
Yeah.
The question is, who do I need to become in order to lead this?
Yeah.
When you start to go to work on that question, that is a very different day. It's a very different reflection, very different introspection. Now, by the way, on the backside of that, you need to shut up and listen, go for a walk, get outside, go sit in the deer stand, I don't care where you got to go, get quiet, turn your phone off, turn your radio off, turn your iPad off, get away from your computer, and actually go download those answers and then implement what you're hearing. And that's what most people won't do, which is why we have so few actual intentional leaders in this space.
Yeah, that's so powerful. The biggest mindset shift that really slapped me in the face, because I thought I was being intentional when I left corporate America and started my own business. The employee versus the entrepreneur mindset was a thing I did not know I needed to be prepared for. And shifting from employee mindset to owner mindset was a whole thing that took me about a year to just really process. I'm still working through it. And there are days where it'll be easy, and then there's other days where it's like, oh yeah. But the key to all of it is just reflection and being aware of, like, is this a mindset that's holding me back? Maybe I don't know how to deal with it, but at least I can bring awareness and call it out. And that's the whole key. I think that's a key to what you talk about in your group trainings. That's what I talk about in my coaching, is like, maybe we don't know how to shift, or maybe we don't want to shift. Maybe we're not ready to change yet. But the fact is that you can at least call it out and you're aware that it's a thing.
Yeah. What was can you put some labels on your experience in transitioning from employee mindset to owner mindset? Because I think that's something I would love to see more employees do, which is just adopt an ownership mindset inside their roles. But I'm curious, what was that transition for you?
Yeah, well, I'm actually in the midst of writing like a little ebook around owner versus operator mindsets. And I think it rings so true, especially growing up on a farm, right? Like, I always had this mentality around like what productivity meant. And so like I can specifically remember being on the couch and my dad opening the door from the garage and me jumping up off the couch because I didn't want him to see that I was like being lazy or resting, right? Like I needed to look busy. Otherwise something was wrong, right? And I just—
so much of my life spent that way.
I still do it. Like even when my husband walks in the house, I better go wipe the counters off, right? Like it's such a real thing that I still struggle with. And I think that the same kind of mindset happened when I became an entrepreneur. Is when I was an employee, like the standard working from 8 to 5, like got to be in front of your computer, need to be doing something. Otherwise it doesn't count. If you're not in your office, or you're not on the phone with a client, or if you're not putting a proposal together, right? Like you're not being productive. And the thing that happened when I became an entrepreneur is that, I'd come downstairs and I'd sit in front of my computer, but just because I'm clicking around inside my emails or doing something, that doesn't mean I'm being productive. I'm just going through motions and I'm checking a box, and it's not intentional work. And so was
Yeah.
this helping me build a business? Was this helping me get in front of clients? Was this actually helping me be productive? No, I was just going through motions. And so when you take away the steady income and the benefits and the boss, it's on you. It's time to own the business, right? And
Yeah.
no one
Yeah.
else is going to show up for me. If I don't grind and do the work, I'm not going to get an
Yeah.
income. And
Yep.
so
Right.
like the things that I did each day had to change, because is this intentional? Is this building my business? If it's not, I can't do it. I cannot spend my time doing that thing anymore, because it's not going to bring me an income, which I have to have now. I don't have a choice
Correct.
now. I
Yeah.
have to be productive. It has
Yeah.
to be intentional.
There's no showing up and like going through the motions and then getting paid especially once you become a solo entrepreneur. No funding, no backing, no loans, no anything, right? And like you got to go generate this cash from nothing. Effectively, is what's happening, right? Which is very cool. It's very biblical from a creative perspective, and I love it. And right, but if I were to go take a job today, I mean, I at least have maybe 3 to 6 months of runway to start, to kind of figure it out. And you don't have that flexibility unless you got a bunch of savings that you're falling back on, but you don't want to deplete that either. Like I have savings, but I don't want to go deplete savings just because I don't feel like it's selling this month.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a very, it makes it makes all of it much, much more visceral, right? The survival mode kind of kicks in, but then you have to also beat that, right? And start thinking about, okay, now how do I, not only how do we generate, but now how do I allocate it? Right? How do I multiply it?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that comes into the ownership mindset. And at the same rate, I often think about Joseph in the, in the Old Testament. People think of Joseph's, dream color Technicolor or whatever the musical was, the coat of many colors. Anyway, here's a guy who, he's the favorite son, but the most hated brother, and ends up, his brothers are like, hey, let's get rid of this guy. So we sell him into slavery. I'm paraphrasing a lot of things here just for the sake of time. But so now he gets sold into slavery, and then he ends up in Potiphar's house. And in that space, like he owns it. Right. And he rises to the cream rises to the top, and he was kicking butt, now running the house, as a servant. Things go the wrong way. He ends up in jail. But while he's in jail, he serves. To the best of his ability. And then when he finally gets out of jail, gets out of prison years later, then, he shows up again in something that he doesn't own. Egypt was not his. He wasn't even an Egyptian, but he ends up as the governor of all of Egypt. Right. And, with all this power, and then is able to save his family. And that's, where the generation of all Hebrews, came, whatever, several hundred years later. Now they're crossing, now leaving, right. And crossing over the sea, and all the story that we know behind that. So anyway, but the point is, right, here we have somebody who has really assumed that level of ownership over their situation, even though they were being put into situations that they didn't ask for. Right. And that's what when we're coaching employees, a lot of the time, we say the same thing. Like, I want you to think about yourself like an owner. Maybe you don't get to make all the decisions. You don't get to make all the policy decisions. You may not always agree with the direction that your CEO or your team leader is taking the company, but you can reflect back on that story and know that if I step into the role and own it to the best of my ability, eventually I will get promoted into something even better. Just serve intentionally as an owner in the role, and good things have to happen. It's literally a rule of the universe. So wild stuff. What were you doing before all this? Before you got in, and I know you had some certifications and things that you went through to sort of get ready for all this, but what was your career like before you got into this space?
I was a career job hopper.
Okay.
I was. I mean, so the moment that I graduated from college, I thought that I was going to come home and take over the farm. I'm one of 4 daughters, and none of my other sisters wanted anything to do with the farm, 4th generation. And so I had this grand idea that I was going to come home and farm. My grandpa was still alive, farming with my dad, and there wasn't really a place for me. And turns out people are not as receptive to new ideas and changing in the ag industry as I thought at the ripe age of 19, 20 years old. Right. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
came home with this fancy ag degree and, kind of told my dad and my grandpa, well, you're not using this technology. You need to be doing this, or here's this new advanced thing over here. And it really just fell on deaf ears, literally my uncle's deaf.
sure.
And, like it wasn't going anywhere. And it was kind of frustrating. And one of the things dad said was, you've got this champagne taste on literally well water budget, right? We cannot pay you. Like, we don't even have beer money right now. Like, we're broke.
Yeah.
We can't afford to pay you what you think you're worth. We want to show you how to farm, but you need to go get a real job. And so that was just super defeating for me. Not feeling like I had a place, not feeling like I had a voice. Obviously, I was young and immature and didn't really have a plan. I just was hoping that life was going to be given to me, right? Like we all do at that
Right.
age. And so I went and got a job at our local John Deere dealership. And I was cutting chains and filling battery, with acid and hydraulic hoses and delivering parts and all the stuff, and then coming home and farming afterwards. And I did that for about 3-ish years. And I was like, this sucks, right? Like, holy cow, like there's no way that this is what this is supposed to feel like. I was so tired and burnt out. And by age 23, 24 years old, I was like, what is this? Like I don't have a social life. I don't know what to do with this. And it just so happened that New Year's, I went to St. Louis to hang out with some friends and ran into my old college boyfriend. And next thing you know, we rekindle. And I was like, I got to figure out a way to move to Missouri. Like I'm in love again. Like here's this thing. And so I moved to Missouri and get back together with my now husband. And probably 10 months later, I found out I was pregnant. So life took a turn of events for me. And I moved to Missouri to work for corporate John Deere. I forgot that piece. And I thought I found like my dream job, right? Like that. I moved to Missouri, found this dream job, making more money than I'd ever made in my life. It was twice what I was making at the dealership, traveled for a living, right? And then 10 months into my career, I find out that I'm pregnant. And so that just really threw a wrench in what I thought was my now plan. And so I left working for John Deere, got a job working at a farm and home corporation and was doing purchasing for them. And I hated everything that I was doing. I was sitting in an office crunching numbers. In the Working Genius thing, that was a frustration of mine, right? Like that's so opposite of where my skills and passions and talents lie. And so I was very burnt out, but the money was good. I was home with the baby. There was a lot of opportunity there. And so I just thought, I got to suck it up. And I thought, this is what life looks like as an adult. You just don't enjoy it, right? Like, this is what it felt like at the dealership. This is what this feels like now. Working just must not be an enjoyable thing. No wonder parents are always grumpy, right? And so I just thought that work equaled miserable. And so I left that job and, just kind of job hopped every couple of years thinking, okay, it must be the company, must be the product, must be the people I worked with. I blamed all of these external things. And finally, I found a role, which is the role that I had right before I left corporate America. And I was like, okay, this is the kind of stuff I want to do, which was it was a sales manager job, but I was like essentially coaching retailers on how to sell and position our products and put business plans together and stuff. So I was like coaching, which is where I took Maxwell Leadership, and I was going to take that coaching training and apply it to my corporate role. And I realized I love doing this, but I don't want to do it for somebody else. How do I do this on my terms? And so again, unexpectedly got pregnant with baby number 2, worked there for about a year. And then, like I said, while I was on maternity leave, I just put my head down and I was like trying to say, how can I build a business around doing the stuff that I love? I made more money on maternity leave than I did in my full-time year salary at my company. And I thought, why am I not doing this full time? Why am I not taking the thing that brings me so much joy and energy that's obviously making me money. Why won't I do this full time? And so I put an exit strategy together, and I told my husband, I said, listen, this is what I'm doing. And this is scary as hell, but I got to do this. I don't know. Like I kept
Mm-hmm.
asking God, I was like, give me a sign, give me a sign. I mean, there would be billboards on the side of the road. I'm like, that's not big enough. Give me another one. And
Yeah. Right.
eventually, I just kind of got slapped in the face with it. And it's like, you better just do this. Otherwise I'm going to, you're gonna have to figure this out. And so I just pulled the plunge and I did it. And I don't feel like I've worked in almost 2 years. It's been the most amazing thing ever. And I took a leap of faith on myself. I made a decision. I had my back on it. But I don't
Mm-hmm.
think I'd be here had I not gone through all of the ups and downs and the crap, right? Like you don't know what's good unless you've experienced bad. And so I think that set me up very nicely. But yeah, that's what I was doing before I became an entrepreneur is I was job hopping and blaming all these external factors. And the moment that I had to sit down with myself and get familiar with who I am, it was like, oh, I'm the problem. So here's what you need to
Yeah.
do about it.
Yeah. That's great. What do you tell that early career kind of, maybe somebody who's going through that phase of finding who they are in their career, in their 20s to early 30s? What would you share with that person? And maybe, I know there's a lot of young, super powerful, up and coming young women, that could be that are or stepping in or maybe pursuing some of these leadership opportunities, but maybe feel like you felt going through that.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to have a conversation with my younger self, right, and just say, "Here's this piece of advice," I don't know if I would say do anything differently. I would say, in
Mm-hmm.
addition to what you're doing, learn about your skills, learn about what you want, get familiar with who you
Mm-hmm.
are, not just go here and do this because that's what a friend of yours did. Like I went to college because that's where all my friends went to college. I did this degree because
Mm-hmm.
that's where all my friends went. Like it is just, that's the trend. I was jumping on these bandwagons and didn't really actually make any decisions based off of what brought me joy. Right. I thought that I
Got
was
it.
fulfilling this legacy that actually nobody wanted me to fulfill, and it bit me in the
Mm-hmm.
butt. Right. And so that would be my advice to other people who are, just starting off their careers is like, get to know yourself. What are your skills? What are your passions? What are your values? What season of life are you in? Right? Because it's going to look different
Yep.
for everybody. There's no cookie cutter answer there, but get familiar with who
Mm-hmm.
you are. And that's essentially what AgriMinds does, is help you do some deep work around who you are and help you make
Yeah.
decisions based off of what that is.
Very cool. I think that's good. That's really, really good advice. Really good advice. Because I'll be, I run into people all the time. They're like, man, like what you do out there, that it looks so amazing, and it is. And being on the coaching end of the stick is really incredible. I didn't set out to create a coaching company when I first started. That was not the intention. But as I got into it, I realized, oh, this is what people need. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my ideas kind of what I thought I wanted to do, but then the market also informed me like this is what the market needs. And so we built a business around
Yeah.
that. And now I'm doing that again with the Momentum company now, now launched new services, new things like, what did the market told me that that companies needed, a chief learning officer, but they're small businesses and they probably can't afford a full-time chief learning officer. So let's build a fractional service and offer
Mm-hmm.
that. I didn't really think about that 15, 20 years ago when I was getting started in this space. But now, because of being in the space, that equipped me and the team with the ability to be able to execute on that. And now we have a whole new thing,
Yeah.
a new way to be able to serve people. It's pretty cool. So that would be my advice, right? Is like, don't make your decision today based on where you're not, right? Or maybe
Yeah.
you see someone, um, you see someone who's where you'd like to see yourself down the road, and you get into this comparison game, and you're like, well, they're there already. Well, they've been in it for 15 or 20 years and they know a thing or two, right?
Yeah.
So be curious, right? Buy them lunch, get them to tell you some things, right? Pick up the phone and give a call. Like you gave me a call here about a year ago or, year and a half ago. And it's like, how'd you get there?
I did. And that's so
Yep.
important to call out too, is like,
Yep.
I, I found you on LinkedIn. And I think that this is an
Mm-hmm.
important piece of the story of how you and I are connected, because I was, again, trying to find somebody or something to help me in the needs that I had. And I couldn't find anything. And I finally was like, okay, I'm going to build the thing. And then a few months after that, I do this randomly still today. I'll get on social media and I'll search like ag coach or whatever,
Yep.
just to see like what comes up. You were somebody who came up on LinkedIn, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to know who this guy is. He's doing what I am trying to build, which is how
Yep.
you and I got
Yep.
connected. And at
Mm-hmm.
first, my mindset went to, crap, he's doing it already. There's no room
Right.
for me. You know,
Oh
like
gosh. Yeah.
he's already built this amazing business. You've been doing this, you know, more than several years, and there's no spot for me. I might as well find something else to do. And
Mm-hmm.
I've learned and I've matured, you know, over the last several years of just like, there's so much room for all of us. The
Mm-hmm.
things that you teach me are so different than the things that I can teach you and to our
Mm-hmm.
clients, right? Like, we have a different
Yep.
background, we have a different little niche inside of this industry. And I think that that's such an important thing to do and to speak to our past selves as well, right? Like, just because somebody's doing something similar to you are doesn't mean there's not space for you. And there's things that
Right.
you and I have collaborated on. I've sent people your way, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense
Mm-hmm.
for you to work with more than me. And I just think that that is such a piece, like, again, that comparison of like, oh, is there room for me? Is there an abundance mindset, a scarcity mindset? Like, call it out, but
Mm-hmm.
embrace who you are and who you're not.
Right. Yep. 100%. I want to tap back on that, the piece he said about, oh, someone else is in that space. You know, there's no room, you know, for my thing. And this is an interesting little comparison thing that we do, right? As humans. And I don't care what you're in. We're in the training and speaking and coaching space, and there's probably some overlap on what we would do. And like the old school would say, like, I'm going to bring her on your podcast. You had me on your podcast. Like, you shouldn't do that. And that's very old school. Like, of course, we should be promoting each other in this
Yeah.
space, right? Which is why, you know, one of the reasons why is that important? Because, like, I mean, generosity gets rewarded with in-kind generosity. Right. The most successful people I know are often the most accessible, and they're the most generous. So share your platform, share your thing. I don't have room, and you're doing some coaching. Like, I'll be honest, like, I don't want to have those conversations. I don't. It's
Yeah.
it's some of it's a little bit different curriculum. We're more embedded with companies and trying to help them get the most out of their people, you know, and so we just have, you know, slightly different messages, which is cool. There's plenty of opportunity. We're working on corporate budgets, right? Where you may be working on more of a personal budget, and vice versa, in different ways. So anyway, my point with all this is, like, if you're listening to this and you're in a sales role, you're a grain merchandiser, and you're a grain originator, or both in many cases, and or you're an agronomy salesperson, or an equipment salesperson, or whatever. Pick your thing, or you know, somebody who's trying to grow your ag tech startup. Okay, your biological startup. There's so much noise in that space, but if there's noise, that means there's opportunity first and foremost, right? If there's noise, there's opportunity. So you just have to lean into that to get started, and then you will find your tribe that's more attracted to you, your vibe, your thing that you're promoting, the thing that you have. That, and I'm not talking about your product or service, like the thing that you have. Like, you're going to find people that are, there are people out here looking for coaching, would love to go work with Kacee because they identify with her. Something in her story, something in her background, something in the way she shows up, and vice versa. There's people that would want to work with someone like John Anderson from my team because they love the fact that he's the cowboy coach, and he actually has cattle, and he was a bull rider, and, you know, he's worked in all the ag retail jobs because his dad was this, you know, the GM of a small co-op, and he just grew up in it. Right. And so they want to talk to somebody like that who really, truly knows the business. They don't want to talk to me. Let's be honest. But with your top 20% of your customers are going to generate about 80% of your revenue. Okay. So think about it this way. Your top 20% of your customers are going to generate about 80% of your revenue. When you become really, really clear on who you are, what you stand for, what you'll tolerate, what you won't tolerate, you start to develop something we call in our work, the attractor factor. Okay. Once you have that attractor factor in place, you know what your core values are. you know who you are, what you stand for, what you will and won't tolerate. You will start to find customers that are attracted to people that have that. You could be selling the most boring thing. You could be selling seed. You could not that I don't want to offend the seed people because seed is fascinating, but it's just right. You're selling another commodity to people who buy these commodities from you so that they can produce more commodities so that we can buy back more commodities. That's the ag cycle, right? And so, your fertilizer is not that special from the fertilizer down the road from the next guy. Your nitrogen stabilizer is not that special from the guy down the road. I mean, I know all of your features and benefits are really incredible, and I'm not trying to piss anybody off here and say that your thing isn't better, but there's a lot of options is what I'm saying, right? There's a lot of options out there. So if you get lost in comparing your features and benefits versus someone else's features and benefits, then you miss the point of this whole conversation, which is double down on who you are. Mm-hmm. You're going to find the people who like who you are, and they're more likely to do business with you. Everybody says in this business, this is a relationship business. But you know what they do, Kacee? 90% of the time in my experience is they try to position their product first.
Yeah.
And you can't have a relationship with a product. You can only have a relationship with a human.
Mm-hmm. And that's so hard to do. It's so hard to do. I'm so guilty of that myself. And I acknowledge it, right? And there's only so much time in a day. There's only so many hats you can wear, right? Like, I get it. It's so hard to do, but I think you're right. Like, just continually reevaluating your approach and checking in with yourself and saying, like, is this working or not working, right? Like, I'm guilty of it too. We all are. And, but I think that's why these conversations and these programs and what we both offer is so important, because it's just constantly bringing it top to mind for you of just saying, like, oh yeah, I need to check in on myself. Oh yeah, I need to be intentional with my actions and reflecting and saying, is this what I'm wanting to do? Is this how I want to show up? Is this working for me? Is this not working? Where am I getting held up? Right. And like, that's why every time I'm getting ready to launch my 5th round of AgriMinds. And I say every single time I've done this, I've learned more about myself. Like, it's not just for the participants, like, even as the leader, the facilitator of the program, like, I'm learning so much, and being open-minded to different people's perspectives and tools. Like, there's things that I've learned from my participants, and I'm like, that needs to be incorporated in this program. Like, thank you so much for bringing that up. And that's what growth is. That's what intentional growth is. That's what intentional leadership is not saying I have the answer and everybody listen to me. It's, I'm willing to assess the situation. I'm willing to reevaluate. I'm willing to step up and say I did something, wrong, and here's what we can do differently next time. And I think that's essentially what we're all striving to do. It's just sometimes we lose sight of that.
Yeah. Yep. Very well put, my friend. Very well put. Well, as we bring it in for a landing, any last thoughts? Tell us where we go find more about you. Obviously, LinkedIn, Kacee, Kacee, for those of you that are on audio. Bohle, Bohle, and AgriMinds. You can look it up. You can find her there. But give us some last thoughts, and how do we find out more?
Yeah, thanks so Mark for having me again. I mean, it's just been so fun to reconnect with you and watching what you're doing in this space. I mean, I'm learning from you every single day. And so I just want to say thank you for bringing me on, for being, a friend and mentor in this space. And yeah, people can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm most active. I try my hand at Instagram, and it's just not my spot. So you can find me at Ag Coach Kacee on Instagram. But I've got some new cohorts coming up for 2025 for AgriMinds. So if that's something that piqued somebody's interest, you can click any of the links in my bio to learn more about AgriMinds. But I'm just thankful to be here today.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you, my friend. Thanks for being on.
Yes, thank you.